Hello, my name is Gabriela. I'm an interior architecture student, and this is my final major project. You've heard the brief twice now before from my peers, so I'm not going to go through it again, but this is my project for La Bahadia, and I am attacking the climate crisis. And I decided to do a street market and a community garden in order to do that. So I named it Rooted. This is the port, just to refresh your memory. The whole point of the port expansion was to bring in more tourists and to create a more luxurious feeling within the port. So it will be expanded to 911 meters in diameter, and I decided to choose this volume here, just to allow more foot traffic and So it's important that we continue to move forward with climate change in mind because it's severely impacting our planet, and it's showing in our planet with the rise in the sea level, the melting of the Arctic ice, and the rise of the global temperature and carbon dioxide. So I decided to choose to focus my project on carbon dioxide, which I hope will then, by decreasing the amount in the atmosphere, will then lower the temperatures, which will prevent the ice from melting and therefore prevent the sea level from rising. So let's talk about carbon dioxide for a minute. This rectangle is representative of our carbon budget, which means how much carbon we can afford to put into the atmosphere before climate change is essentially irreversible. And this scary amount of the rectangle is our historic carbon emissions, which is representative of how much we've already put into the atmosphere. Meaning all we have left is this, which is 580 billion metric tons of carbon, and that is 1/5 of our budget. And based off of how we've handled it in the past, between 2008 and 2017, we emitted almost 400 billion metric tons, meaning if we continue on this path, we're going to overshoot our budget within the next 11 to 13 years. And these predictions, which are from National Geographic, are keeping in mind that going forward, we're going to have new innovations and new technologies that will help to prevent these emissions. So these are just predictions that by 2027, this is how much we will have left, only here, and so on. So this project is for when we are at this point already, and we have completely reached our carbon budget. So not only do we have to think about how we can prevent carbon from getting into the atmosphere, we need to think about how we can remove it, because based on how we're handling and treating our planet, we're going to reach this budget. So how can we do this? How can we remove carbon from the atmosphere? Well, we know that carbon is stored in the atmosphere, like I said, in the biosphere, in our fossil fuels, in our oceans, and in our soil. And all of these places are super harmful to have carbon stored, except for soil. So I decided to focus my project on soil and how we can come up with solutions using carbon storage in soil. There are organic practices happening now, but a lot of the time what we're doing is we're farming and we're gardening and we're planting, but we're using practices that still release the carbon back into the atmosphere, such as tillage and just replanting and digging up the dirt, which is just unproductive. And it's important because 95% of our food is directly or indirectly from farms and planting. And so within the next 50 years, if we don't act and we don't change, then we're not going to have enough food to feed ourselves within 50 years, which is a small number. So a solution, which actually might seem almost too simple, but is very real, is regenerative agriculture, which is simply put any practice that helps to reverse climate change using soil matter. So there are 9 practices, and 4 of them require livestock, so I'm only using 5 in mine. But there's biochar, which is the burning of compost and putting that into the soil. Agroecology, which is the integration of other plants to make sure that this is a natural environment and that the plants are helping each other. No tillage, which obviously I'm doing a garden, so there won't be any tractors, but it is important to note that I will not be using any method that uses soil turnover and therefore emits carbon back into the atmosphere. I will not be doing that. And the use of perennial crops, which is any crop that regrows and doesn't need to be replanted annually, as well as compost, which I think most people know what that is. So in addition to that, I'll be using a phytopurification system, which is basically just reusing and purifying contaminated water and using it again in the sprinkler system to water the plants. So it will be a self-sustaining system, which actually should earn you up to, or earn my building, up to 39 points in the LEED system, which is a green building certification. So what does the future of shopping look like? Well, if we look at what we're buying online right now, groceries and food is actually one of the last things that we're willing to buy online, because we want to touch and feel our food, we want to smell it, we want to see it. And so the future of architecture, the future of shopping is going to be heavily based on this experience economy, which means that we don't want to leave our house unless it's worth our time. We don't want to make plans unless we have this experience and we're going out and really like spending the day there. So I have to keep that in mind, and also revolving everything around social aspects. So more so designing a social space that happens to have a spot for food or happens to have a garden. And most importantly, we need to start combining our urban and rural designs, because cities are becoming more and more populated and they need to be green. So based off like the trend in my ideas of there being this luxurious street market, which is kind of contrasting, as well as this just like contrasting ideas in general, and just having this like organic and green idea be this luxurious and like most exclusive experience. So I decided to follow with that idea and create my concept for my actual design to be contrast. So I started by, I knew I wanted to build underground because there are several benefits, and I wanted my building to be open, and I needed to allow sunlight and water into the building. So I wanted to make sure that heat wouldn't have been a problem, and building underground allows you to have low impact design that basically sustains its own temperature. So I started playing with volumes, just working with negative spaces and contrast and different shapes within the actual shape of the plot. And once I generally came up with how I wanted it to be laid out, I moved on to my roof, which was designed completely around the gardens so that there's enough light for the plants. So this is the general movement of my roof that I came up with, which you'll see more of. So this is my ground floor. So this is level 0, and this is where you would enter. There's ramps going down, so the first ramp is 10 meters and goes down 0.8, and the rest are 5 meters and go down 0.4. So here is 0, and at the bottom in the market, where you come down here, it will be negative 2.4 meters. And you can see the contrast here between this shape and the gardens and how the market is going to be laid out as well. And this is the negative level, so this is the representing the market, which I wanted it to not contrast the entire shape, but more so the garden. So I went back to my original shape when designing the market. And there's also a packaging center here, which I will explain better. And this is my final roof design from a top perspective. So you can see here there will be gardens, here, 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 and here. But here will be herbs, so it requires a lot less sunlight. The way I organized my garden was that each one has fruit in the middle, and then vegetables along here that are organized by how deep the roots go. So up here, since it's the highest, maybe I should have shown this here. Up here, since it's the highest, it will go deeper into the ground, and therefore deep-rooted plants will be there, and shallow-rooted plants will be here, medium. So this is one of my section cuts, which is cutting along right here. You can really get a sense of the contrast between the interior structure and the roof. And here gives you an even better idea of the contrast, not only with the market and the roof, but also with the volumes that are surrounding it, which are just rectangular volumes. So yeah, you can really see the contrast here. And the market, this is on the bottom floor, so you're 2.5 meters underground basically. And it just shows that you can't see the garden from there. And then just one final one that really beautifully shows the contrast within the whole building, the whole structure, all the shapes. So the materials that I use, as we've discussed, cement or concrete is a really harmful material. It emits a lot of carbon into the atmosphere when it's being made. So Carbon Cure Technologies has come up with a cement that, just like the soil in my project, stores the carbon instead of releasing it into the air. And so I use that along the ramps and the walls and the floor of the lowest level. And for my floors in the garden, I use timber. And the reason I put a photo of the Metropole Parasol in Sevilla is because it was a huge inspiration for my project. It's one of the most innovative designs in Europe, maybe even the world. And there are a lot of similarities between it and my project, because this includes a market and a museum, and it's a social space. And for my roof design, I use Porcelanosa Crayon, and it's a moldable weather and fireproof material, so I thought it was perfect for all the movement going on in my roof. So here's a 3D visual that displays the roof really well and just how you would see it from a street level. And also you can just see more of the contrast between my building and the surrounding site. So here we focused on opening the roof where the trees grow so that there is no limit. And here is just another visual of the entrance, which shows more of the contrast between the interior space, or just gives you a gist of the feeling of the interior space versus the roof and how you would see it from the street. And in my video, I'm going to show you a walkthrough of my whole project, but just to give you a general gist slowly of my structure, here is the second garden, so 1.2 meters underground, and it's just showing the raised beds, just the general circulation, and how you're going down from level to level. And here is the last garden, which is 2 meters underground. And you can just really get a sense of here how, even though on the floor plan, maybe all the gardens look very similar, but the feeling when you're there would be so different from one another because you're in different parts of the earth, you're deeper underground, and there's a different movement completely, and therefore different shadows and different sunlight in each level. And in terms of the market, so instead of it just being like a typical market now where you're just selling what you would essentially get from the garden, it's more like if you are a member of this place and you, let's say, buy tomatoes from this garden and you make your own sauce and then you want to sell it, you can come here and you have a vendor stand and you can sell your products. So here's just another view of the market. There's 6 vendors total, and here would be a fire pit for the biochar regenerative agriculture method that I was talking about earlier. And just briefly, this is how it would look if you wanted to subscribe and you would get produce from the garden. So you can pick what you want and receive either a weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly subscription box full of fresh produce, local produce from the garden. And when you're actually at the garden or at the market, you can use this app that I would want to create that essentially you can scan the vegetation and it will tell you important information about how it's helping our planet. So how much carbon it's absorbing, how much it actually harvests and grows and consumes generally. So before my video, I just, well, firstly would love to thank my tutors, Katerina, Adriana, and Gianluca for helping me and supporting me through it. I think I was really committed to this project. I loved my idea, so I was really passionate when it came to working on it, and yeah, I'm pretty proud of how it turned out. So we can play the video. Thank you.